Good morning, guys. Day number 8. Well, I'm going to be back talking about electronic cigarettes today. If you're following for my lifestyle stuff, just skip to the next one or something like that. I'm going to be talking a lot about electronic cigarettes in this one. Okay, now that everybody's not a vapor has left this video, I'm going to say a word that has the internet in an uproar about electronic cigarettes. Diacetyl. Okay. If you're following social media, so forth, so on, there's a huge thing that they found large amounts of diacetyl and other diketones in 5-punch juice. That is what that is. I'm not taking a stand either way on that. What I want to talk about is how our community may be giving vaping a bad name. Okay, so I'm going to be taking a little different standpoint on this. So before I throw this out there, my viewpoint on these crazy devices we use is as long as I'm doing less harm to my body now than when I was smoking, it is achieving its goal. My goal with this is tobacco harm reduction. It's not tobacco harm elimination. I'm never going to look at you and go 100% safe. For a fact, I know there's nicotine in here. Nicotine, while not that bad, is a mild stimulant. So let's say I had an extremely weak heart and I was extremely, susceptible to stimulants. That could be bad for me. Okay? 100% safe, no. Generally recognized as safe, that's a horse of a different color. Okay, so that being said, cigarettes have diketones in them, such as diacetyl. Okay, so I was going through doing the research to see what the acceptable level is. I'm going to set all that aside because what troubled me is when I was doing my research how the reports came back. So the first thing I looked up is simply what is diacetyl. Because I figured, I'd find an article that says, you shouldn't breathe in more than X amount. That's not what I found. So when I started doing research on what diacetyl is a type of diketone. A diketone is simply a molecule that has 2 carbons and 2 oxygens side by side. That's it. Okay, so that's what a diketone is, and we'll get more into that word in a minute. But specifically on diacetyl, I get looking through it, and it sounds fine. It's like it's an intense buttery flavor. It's a natural product through fermentation of alcohol. So let's get into that in a second. This is not like some crazy man-made chemical that goes, I'm going to split these 2 atoms together and make this really bad artificial butter. No. Whenever you ferment alcohol, the byproduct from the fermentation is carbon dioxide and diketone. As the sugars, such as glucose, fructose, or sucrose, breaks down, 2 things are given off, diketone and carbon dioxide. Also happens when you're making bread. Okay, so now that we've got that this is not some crazy chemist in a lab putting together weird chemical reagents to make this fake artificial butter. It's an artificial butter flavor because it's not derived from natural butter. It's derived from natural ingredients through fermentation. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, I'm looking through and they're talking about how pleasant of a taste it gives to beer, blah, blah, blah. Everything is looking good about this stuff. Now, several different places I looked. I'm going to quote one specifically, and I'm going to put the link in the description happens to be Wikipedia. It gets down to talking about it, and then it starts talking about safety, and it starts talking about the popcorn industry and how some of the workers, had a problem with it. And then out of nowhere, it's like electronic cigarettes. Now, as soon as I looked at that, I'm like, wow. And then it dawned on me. How many people don't know what electronic cigarettes are? And how many people know what beer is and maybe try to find a nice, smooth, buttery beer? And now they're scrolling through, reading something that sounds like it's really, really awesome in beer that they want more of, and the only thing that comes up is Dr. Farsalino, who has done amazing work for our community. The information is great, but the only mention to it there is there's diacetyl in almost everything. I'm paraphrasing it there. The exact quote is, a 2014 publication found that diacetyl was present in many sweet-flavored electronic cigarette liquids. According to that research, diacetyl is approved for food use but is associated with respiratory disease when inhaled. The study concluded that this diacetyl is an avoidable risk for electronic cigarette liquid, and measures could be taken to the industry to eliminate its usage without limiting the availability of flavors. Me and you as a vapor can understand, let's try to move away from diacetyl, which we're going to bring up another point here on in a minute, but let's move away from that to stuff that's not sweet. I don't know of anybody that enjoys savory vapes. I believe one of the first rules of vaping is friends don't let friends vape savory. So the way it reads is every sweet vape has diacetyl in it. Okay, so that's one of my problems with it. So I decided to find out what a diketone is, because maybe just diacetyl was one of the bad diketones, and maybe there would be an overall listing of, this diketone's okay, this one's not. Like I was looking for AP content too. Well, when you do a search for diketone, so let's pretend I'm a beer aficionado and I'm looking up for a buttery beer and I find out about diacetyl and I go, diketones. The entire Google search is either A, chemical diagrams, or B, people complaining about it in electronic cigarettes. Nowhere else in the first 5 pages of Google was the word diketone used. So what kind of impression are we putting out there for non-vapors? Now, again, rolling back to the beginning of this video, I do definitely understand with inhalation, there is proof that it could potentially cause hazard. At what levels, I still haven't, to this point, found that out. And I'm not going to pretend I'm a doctor. I don't know. I'm trying to find this out. But what I'm more worried about is the perception to a non-vapor. Now, we got that diacetyl comes from fermentation of ethanol. When you boil it down, so I'm going to start breaking out big chemical words here. And I'll pick on my favorite chemical here in a minute. I'm going to break out big chemical words. Do not let these scare you. My favorite chemical word, which is a horrible, horrible chemical compound. It's so corrosive, it can break apart mountains. It rusts iron. You can take an organic vegetable, wash it off, and it will still be contaminated by this chemical. It's literally everywhere. It's dihydrogen monoxide. Okay. Now, some of you might be chuckling because dihydrogen monoxide is simply H2O, otherwise known as water. Everything I just said about water is 100% true, but when I make it sound like a chemical compound, and it sounds so much more dangerous than what it is. So, vegetable glycerin and propylene glycol, okay, two chemical names. Vegetable glycerin is a naturally found sweetener. Propylene glycol is an antimicrobial, often used to sanitize, you know, AC units, stuff like that. It's also used in asthma inhalers. Vegetable glycerin you can find generally in toothpaste. So these are not like super bad chemicals, but vegetable glycerin and propylene glycol, both are recognized as safe by the FDA. They're both alcohol derivatives. So even unflavored e-liquid, since it's based upon an alcohol derivative, and diketones, specifically diacetyl, are made as a product of fermentation, will have trace levels of diacetyl in it. So is it just the sweet flavor? Is it coming from the base carriers we use? If inhalation's that bad on it, why do we use propylene glycol to deliver asthma medicine? Because at the end of the day, again, it's a naturally occurring compound. It happens from fermentation of alcohol. Okay, fermentation of alcohol creates this chemical. It's a naturally occurring chemical. It's not some lab-made, man-made, crazy splitting atoms together thing. Nothing is ever going to be 100% free of it when you get down to brass tacks. So what these tests are measuring, and many of you that's looked at them will see something that says like less than 15 parts per million. Okay. Everything has some in there, and some will put non-detectable and some will put trace amounts. So a trace amount might mean they found 1 part per million. So it's a trace amount. 1 part per million is next to nothing. 1 part per billion, which some of these tests even go down that far, and will still say trace, but not non-detectable. 1 part per billion is even less. That being said, ND does not mean it's not in there. Non-detect does not mean it's not in there. It just means the specific part they looked at did not have that in it. So like if you're looking at my face, right now you're not seeing any pink. Now you'll see just a little tiny bit of pink from my beard. Now if you look here, you'll see a lot, which is another thing that I really heavily question about this, because when these are being sent off to independent lab testing, I wish I could find a study. I looked high and low for it. I didn't save the link to it, but there was a specific bottle of juice that was opened and sent off to 3 separate labs, 10 mils each, all pulled out of the same 30 ml bottle, and they came back with drastically different test results. Did something happen to the liquid in shipping? What does it mean? Is part of my problem, and I got a little bit into this Monday night on my live show when I had a customer or a viewer ask me about it, and then I had somebody ask me about how much is an acceptable level, and that's what spawned it up again today. My point here is, yes, we can avoid it if we can, but would I rather see electronic cigarettes work and stop people from smoking and reduce the harm, or would I rather see us lose it potentially over a naturally occurring chemical that's in cigarettes anyhow? I rather see people vape diacetyl all day if it's less than they were getting in cigarettes. Do I think we have the right way of testing yet? No, I don't. Our industry is completely too new for this, and the testing, to the point that I've seen, has me extremely confused and is not very friendly. Like, if I send a liquid off to 3 separate labs, it should say there's 1% in each. It shouldn't have one saying it's 50%, one saying it's 25%, and one saying it's 5%. Numbers that far off tell me there's something wrong with the testing process and how they're doing it, or there's something outside influencing it. It's like if you roll back to the original tests that are quoted a lot when you talk about FDA regulations, they were using cartomizers, and they would fire the cartomizer beyond the juiced head in there, so you actually had the filler material burning. So that's where some of the original bad stuff from that first FDA look came in. So at the end of the day, I mean, it's going to be your decision to decide. I'm not saying go out and buy 5 ponds. I'm not saying don't go out and buy 5 ponds. I'm saying, are we even looking at the right issue? Just some food for thought. I'll see you again next time.